it. I mean, it's like from music to medicine or, medical field.
Mhm.
So, so the point is, life is never.
No.
I mean, I would love to know how many of us start off wanting to be one thing in life. And then as we get those experiences, we get people to come along and different things, we turn out to be another. Um, so yeah, it's just very, very interesting.
Sometimes it's access,
Mhm.
So I think like I look at my sister's path, and my sister was always very outgoing in what she did creatively. She was the person that would draw on the wall. She was very particular about the crowns she had. She was into markers. And my parents, were like, okay. And then my sister wanted, I think my mom and my dad put her in an art program, yes, in Philly. It was at Moore College of Art. And because she needed to build a portfolio. So one day she just said to my parents, I want to be an architect. Like, that's what I want to do.
Okay.
And they said, okay, sure. I mean, whatever, that's fine. That's what you want to do. That's cool.
Hmm.
And we find out later in life that we're actually doing stuff that our parents wanted to do.
Who wanted to be
So
an architect?
right. So my dad wanted to be an architect. I had no idea. Neither did my sister. My sister was like, what? So he wanted to be an architect, but he did not have the access to resources to do that. My
Wow.
mother did not tell me until I got my PhD that she actually wanted to be a chemist. That was her other career. So we were never like pushed to be in these spaces. They're like, hey, you do what you want to do. I mean, food science, my mom and my dad say all the time, we don't even know how this happened because you didn't cook near thing growing up. And I was like, no, I was just there to eat. And there's a career in that in food science.
Wow. So
So,
speaking of that, you cook a little bit more now, what you say?
oh yeah, I mean, when I got to grad school, it was over. Like, I
Okay.
mean, I had to. And it's funny because my parents didn't know if I could cook well.
Okay.
And it wasn't until my mom had to come to DC, and she kept saying to my sister, like, oh, she's your sister says she's going to cook something. I don't know how this is going to work out. And I made some like pasta dish, and my mom was very surprised.
Okay.
She was like, oh, you're a really good cook. I was like, I've been cooking this long. So it's funny now. And the thing is, they had no idea that I used to be the head of the food committee for the food science club at NC State.
Okay.
So we all had to cook something. And then,
Hmm.
and I think it's funny now, actually, I just made this epiphany that I did menu curation in grad school. And that's what part of what we do at Crescendo is menu curation.
Wow. So were you paying attention? You may not have been actually cooking, right? Growing up but you were paying attention, what you say?
And I was eating. I was eating all the time. See, and the thing is, when I would try to make something would happen. So there's a story about how I try to make chocolate chip cookies and they looked beautiful, but they tasted disgusting. And
Hmm.
I tell my parents all the time is because at the time when I was making it, I was home from high school or something. And my mother's mom, my grandmother called me. And it was right before I was getting ready to put the sugar in. And she had asked me to go find something at the house. And so it just totally slipped my mind that I never put sugar in there. And so when I came back and I put it in the oven, I looked and I was like, oh, shoot. I forgot the sugar. So my mom and dad tried it. They were like, this is, and I said, oh, don't eat it. They're like, this is disgusting. What? And I was like, I forgot the sugar. They're like, how did you forget the sugar? Well, because somebody called me. What? And I was like, your mom called me while I was doing this. So it's interesting. So now, of course, I make pound cakes. I mentioned to you earlier before we started that a chef and I started making Cinnabons. I'm actually a very, very good cook and
Okay.
a really good baker. And so they're just like, wow, who would have thought?
Okay.
And my sister cooks all the time. She'd be in the kitchen with my mom and
So
me
just
just talking.
continue to surprise them, huh? What's next coming out of Wanida? What's next?
Surprise, right? Surprise. Even when they were here, it's so funny when my parents came to visit. I didn't cook anything. I was like, please, please, what are you making? Let me
Hmm.
know. So, and my parents used to come to where I lived when I was in the States and would
Hmm.
cook for me because I would make requests. So I'm like, Dad, can you please make me like your lamb chops and red wine? Because it's
I
been some,
love it. I
yeah.
love it. So let's talk about the beginning of Crescendo Foods and how that vision came to play.
So that vision came to play in 2015. So when I was a German Marshall Fund fellow, we were able to stay a little bit longer. So I went to Amsterdam and I saw this really cool restaurant, and they had a menu of like, you can come, it's like a ghost kitchen pretty much.
Mm.
And you can come and order your food and come back and get it. So I said, oh, this would be really cool to have in the US for like Black and brown communities, have nutritious food, all that. And at the time, that was 2015, so I was still working in industry. Then I moved over to the State Department, and we used to have these panels called that were for people who were traveling from out of the country. So they would always do a tour of all the executive branches. So they would come to the State Department first, and we would usually tell them like, "Oh, the question you have, you can go ask the USDA." So we had one with women, African women who are in ag. And so I kept hearing, oh, I make fill in the blank and I don't have a space to scale up. I do everything from my house. It makes it very difficult. What are the systems that you all have in place at the US that we need in our home country? And so I said, you know what? I wonder if this would be something that could work on the continent. And when I lived here in 2018, my task was to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs. So I started seeing kind of putting the pieces together. And so when I came back in 2020, I was working at a nonprofit, and then the pandemic came.
Okay.
And then, I was like, oh, maybe I should go back after the restrictions, had lifted. And my one of my really good friends said, well, you've had this idea, because I had wrote it down and everything just in case I came back to it. Because I, like most people, were like, oh, we're going to go into entrepreneurship once we make our money in whatever industry, and then we'll do it. And it doesn't happen that way most of the time. And so I said, you know what should I do? And she said, well, you have this idea for this kitchen space. Have you thought about like launching it? I was like, that's a really good idea. And so we started, I fought it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing online trainings, but we did our first in-person one in March of 2021. I did this Women in Ag incubator program, and it really kind of helped accelerate what I wanted it to look like. So then I had to think of a name. And I was like, what should I call it? And then the word crescendo just kind of stuck. And I was like, oh, crescendo, because in music theory means to gradually get louder. And so when I was talking to my parents about it, I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she's like, well, what are you going to call this thing? Like, what are you thinking? Like, what are you thinking about? And I was like, oh, I want to call it Crescendo Foods. And she's like, do you know what crescendo means? And I said, yeah. I said, it means to gradually get louder. So we're gradually, I want to help people gradually scale up. And she just like smiled, and she's like,
okay,
well, you paid attention, huh? And I said, yeah. We used to help her grade papers and stuff like in high school, because she had like all these papers to grade. So I know music theory, right? I've been around it all my life. And so it's really like an ode to, really kind of a full circle thing of like where I came from and where I am now. And so, yeah, we started doing online training and then moved into having a brick and mortar. And we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary a couple weeks ago, in January 21st, with opening our first brick and mortar. So it's been a while.
Awesome. So if your 20-minute elevator speech, what would you say Crescendo Foods is?
Oh, I would say we are a culinary playground that supports rising food businesses and foodies and food founders who are looking to feed user innovation to leverage local ingredients, as well as to be able to show off their creative talents by building community, fostering collaboration, and as well as creating an amazing Pan-African ecosystem that supports local folks as well as people in the diaspora and everyone else.
Awesome. So, for those who, you're seeing we've always, as Black people, have moved around the world, lived around the world, right? And I think within the last few years, that has sort of crescendoed and gotten louder and louder, right? Your experience of living, being from, America, living in another country, another continent, how have you been able to make that adjustments?
Oh, you know what? It's been and it definitely has been an adjustment, especially when I lived here before,
Okay.
and you now see what it looks like. What it looks like now. Like
Mm-hmm.
2018 Ghana is very different from 2020, definitely different from 2024. And
Mm-hmm.
so you come here and you realize, like, especially a lot of people with the people on my staff, I notice now more so that they do not that speak English. Like, that's not their first language. Their
Right.
first language is the local language.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that, and I think a lot of people coming from the U.S., because they hear that Ghana is an English speaking country, they assume everybody speaks English and
Mm-hmm.
speaks American English. I mean, my team knows I'm probably like, I'm a very kind of slang person. I even have to be careful of some of the slang I use because it could be a different meaning in a different
Right.
country. So it is a big transition, especially now with, like, I more so associate with a mixture of expats, repacks, and locals. And
Mm-hmm.
we're all feeling it because, of course, with gentrification becomes more, increased housing costs.
Right.
Everybody's economy is economying, so things are more expensive. So it's been an interesting transition. I feel like in Ghana there's always this kind of rebrand because it's different. When I lived here, like I said, in 2018, I was here as a diplomat.
Right.
Different lifestyle, didn't have to worry about housing.
Mm-hmm.
I was making dollars. Going to life may have seemed simpler at the time. And then I was
Mm-hmm.
living kind of in the heart of Accra. Now I still live in Accra, but I'm a little bit further out. And so
Okay.
you start to realize things are a little bit different. Not in a bad way per se, but you start making more of those connections with locals.
Mm-hmm.
Having to call a plumber instead of
Mm-hmm.
having the embassy do it.
Right.
And also understanding how to give directions that are, because giving directions is different from the US. So it is a little bit challenging, but I think that's the thing, is that as Americans, we like our inconvenience. I don't care if you're Ghanaian American, Caribbean American, whatever. We like our America. America has an identity that we like to uphold, which most people do. And I think sometimes too is that when you're coming to Ghana, you have to really, really think about, keeping your identity of who you are as a person, but
Mm-hmm.
also being able to be just much more accepting and open-minded about what's happening. And then also look at if you want to, how can you make a change without trying to displace somebody else?
Right, right. And then business is a totally different living, right? Living there is one thing, but setting a business, not just in Ghana, but anywhere in the world, that's different from a system that you're used to. How was that setting up your business there?
Oh, it was challenging for sure because there's a lot of rules that you have to understand. And
Hmm.
like most countries, they have things in place to protect their citizens.
Right.
Makes absolute sense.
Hmm.
So understanding how to do that can be a bit challenging because you have to have a Ghanaian that you trust to be able to help you register your business. Or if you have the capital, like, six figures to be able to do X, Y, and Z, you probably could. And just understanding the nuances, what does that look like as being a female in this space?
Hmm.
Being African American, is there a foreigner tax that comes along with it, right?
Hmm.
Also, just being able to know if you're buying, a house, does the house belong to somebody in the family that may come back and get it? Like understanding land right issues, understanding taxes, understanding payroll. That's a lot of things that you have to seek out, and making sure you follow the rules. And there's a lot of people who don't follow the rules in any country, but you want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward, because if it's time for you to answer to someone, you can't say, oh, well, I'm registered. I've been operating this business for 10 years and you've never been registered. Like, you're going to, you have to think about it. And also I think too, the intention. A lot
Hmm.
of people have different intentions when they move abroad. It could be to help or hinder. And so and the thing about it is, when you're working in a different country, you have to think about the cultural nuances that come along with it.
Right.
Sometimes my staff does not understand what I say because I speak fast. That happens in the US as well. From the
Hmm.
North, it happens.
Hmm.
But, being able to think about what are some of the ways that you can help with people developing themselves. And how are you developing yourself as either as an employee of another company if you're working here in Ghana, but also how as an employer. So one thing that's important to me is developing my staff. We had a team building in December.
Mm-hmm.
They've never had that.
Okay.
And it was fun. Like we did a pasta cooking
Nice.
class. We did a kizomba class, and then we did regular business stuff. How do we
Mm-hmm.
want the organization to look in 2024? Giving them the space, the breadth and depth to be able to say it's okay to have an opinion.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the times people don't think about that at all. And that's important to me. It's very, very important to me. So I'm very thankful for the staff that have come and gone, who are still here with me. That one of the things there's like we like working with you.
Mhm.
You're easygoing.
That's good, 'cause that's what it's all about. All
Right.
about what are some projects you're working on that you're excited? Some entrepreneurs there and a crowd that you're excited, or even Ghana as a whole, that you're working on? That
Yeah,
you can share.
yeah. I mean, we have a lot. There's always an idea in my head, and I'm glad like I have idea generators, and now we're trying to push it to
Mhm.
implementation. So the first thing that we've launched this year is Plate to Plate. It is the first ever culinary and residence program. So if you're familiar with artist and residency programs, you usually have somebody who comes into a space, they get a designated workstation for a certain amount of time where they'll learn about the culture or whatever they're learning, and then they'll be able to have a project of their own that they'll be fulfilling and sharing with the public.
Mhm.
We're doing the same thing, but instead it's for the culinary space, and
Nice.
it's really for folks who are in the diaspora and people who also just appreciate different cuisines. And
Mhm.
so we just opened up our applications. They actually close in the beginning of March, and it's a 3-week it's kind of a study abroad immersion program for folks who are 18 and above. And you don't have to be a chef. You can be a culinary, a historian. You could be a food blogger. You could be a food business owner. And what we're doing is that it's a tuition-based program. So with that tuition, what's going to happen is that it's used to basically help you with understanding what's happening in the food space in Ghana. So your accommodation is covered.
Nice.
You have cultural and culinary tours, so you'll be understanding chocolate, mango, some of the commodities, and then you will be having excuse me, a workstation in our space because we're a shared kitchen space, and you'll be able to do that and just be able to be connected with the Ghana community. So you'll have a team of Ghanaian culinarians as well to help you for your 3 weeks. And we're only taking a cohort of 4 to 6 people. And
Okay.
then as a requirement, you have to do some type of community related event. So it's
Ooh.
not just a come and party, but you have to do a
Mhm.
master class or a pop-up. If you're a chef, you might want to do a recipe development. You may want to do something with the school. And we're trying to get people away from, oh, I'm going to go and donate to a school because everybody does that. But like, let's actually have like real impact. Maybe
Yeah.
you want to go and talk to the cooking staff and work with them to put together a new menu or something. And not from a colonizer approach, but it's really more from a collaborative approach.
Mhm.
So we have that. We tell people it's $15,000 for 3 weeks, and it covers your stipend, your food and ingredient stipend. All you have to do is really pay for your flight.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm not in the business of trying to plan people's flights. And then you're set, and and our program dates are July 5th through the 26th. So it's
Nice.
exactly 3 weeks.
Oh,
And we put it in July because a lot of the chefs that we've spoken to, they're like, hey, that's right, like outside of wedding season, depending
right.
on where you're located. So we're trying to find, I think we're going to have another one probably again this year because we had somebody who's like, oh, I have a conflict. I would love to join. And I'm like, okay, we'll come. Come later. So I think we'll probably do an annual thing, but this is a really cool like pilot. And then other things we're going to be working on is doing a lot of courses. So we're working with a company called Jar to Go, who they
Okay.
operate in our space. They want to do a canning course, and we're going to be showing people how to can local ingredients, so tomatoes, peppers, but also understanding food science as well and food safety and the science
Mhm.
behind it. It's a 3-day course. And we'll also be doing a couple other things like quick lunches for students, really talking about like the innovation behind it. And then probably sometime next year, we'll be launching our first ever incubation program and
Nice.
really helping entrepreneurs go from idea to concept. And, our thing is we just don't work with chefs and businesses, but we work with people who are food bloggers. So we
Mhm.
always have these really cool workshops. So, kind of getting into food styling with photography,
Mhm.
recipe development, and all the things. But I'm really, really looking forward to what we're going to do with Plate to Plate, especially since, it'll be our first time doing this, my first time ever doing a culinary or any type of culture exchange of this magnitude. And we
Wow.
want to keep it small. I don't,
Yeah.
when you
Yeah,
got 10 people,
absolutely.
it's too much. But we had, and also we're going to give them some goodies while we're here too, like some Crescendo swag for them to be meeting a lot of folks that they've never, they may have been looking at, like, oh, I would love to connect with chef such and such or
Mm.
whoever, and actually trying to make those connections on both sides. So, and then they also get a local language course too before they come. So,
And what's the local language?
oh, so there's several, but we're going to be focusing on tree. So
Okay.
that is mostly what a lot of people speak tree in Accra.
Okay.
So just instead of a lot of people just know like Aquaba, they may know Madase, which means thank you. But
Mhm.
being able to learn a couple other things like how to say please, how are you, which is Mapacho Etisane, and how to ask for, maybe even learning how to ask for how much this costs in the market.
Nice.
So really kind of creating this holistic program that makes people want to come back, but also it could be a lovely introduction to coming to the continent, especially coming to West Africa.
Wonderful. Well, you've got a lot on your hands for the rest of the year. This is
Yes.
gonna be very exciting. How can people learn about how to apply for Plate to Plate?
Sure. So you can go to our website. It is HTTPS with the colon. I always get that wrong. Colon backslash. And it's Crescendo, which is CRESCEND as in dog, OGH.com. And as soon as you get to our website, the first thing that shows up is a picture that says apply to Plate to Plate. And the applications will close March 5th.
Okay.
So that is, yes, so people can find out more. We're actually going to be doing a webinar tomorrow evening, 5 p.m. Accra time, which is 12, I think it's 12 p.m. 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be just a 40-minute call, probably maybe even 30 minutes, that will focus on what the program is about.
Yeah.
It's a cost breakdown to what are people going to be doing, and then they can ask their questions. And then we want to make sure that people understand. I think a lot of the times when folks hear $15,000, they're like, oh my god. But if
Right.
you look at it, you're like, you go to Harvard, you do a Harvard 3-day course, it's like 90,000. So that's
Mhm.
just like, I mean, there's things aren't cheap anymore. So we're talking about getting people their own apartment
Right.
and transportation. That that
Right.
that costs money, and it's one less thing that people have to worry about, right? Having tours put together, all of that. We're also doing a culinary tour collaboration with a group called African Roots Travel. So we're opening that up in June. It's like a 10-day culinary tour for foodies who just want to come and learn about the food culture in Ghana. So we're also doing that as well. And and that, I think that ranges depending on the hotel you stay in. I think it ranges from like 5,200 to about 6,005. So
Right.
imagine, so that's like a week. So we're talking 3 weeks. So like the math adds up, right? So
Mhm.
I think
The
so
math
yeah.
is mathing, huh?
Yeah, the math is math, and exactly. Exactly. So that is the thing that we're going to be doing. So yeah, so people can check us out for the webinar if they want
Wonderful.
to. They can check us out on social media, because then that way they can register and get the Zoom link, and we will be rocking and rolling, and should be announcing our people, our the applicants, fingers crossed, in May.
Okay.
And so that they can get ready to, because they're going to go through visas and all of that, and we'll help them with that, so that in July they'll be touching down in Accra and traveling throughout. It's also hard to travel in Ghana, so we'll be taking people to like Accra and Cape Coast,
Okay.
and so they'll be able to understand the culture and eat really, really good food while they're here. So we're looking forward
Nice.
to it. Yeah.
Nice. So again, you've got your hands full, but anything else outside of the program, outside of the tours, anything else on the horizon that you may be working on, want to do? I know you talked about the incubator program, hopefully in 2025, but then well, let me ask you this. How, if someone wants to work with you just on a regular day to day with Crescendos, they're living
Mhm.
there in Ghana, what's the process of reaching out to do that?
Sure. So we work with the community in several different ways. So some folks may need a kitchen space. We have people do one-offs, or they can do a membership where they have kitchen space hours per month.
Okay.
We also have a training space, which is where I'm sitting in right now, and it doubles as a pop-up space in case somebody wants to do a pop-up dinner, and
Wonderful.
or just a event space. And then, of course, if you like to co-work, you need a place to co-work. Cool, we have that as well. One thing that we'll be launching next week is our first ever bakery, and,
Nice.
so, and I'll be focusing on Cinnabons. And so we're telling people like, hey, come to Westlake on Accra, where you can order a Cinnabon, and you can also sit and eat and have amazing Wi-Fi. So that is what, some of the things that we'll be working on is just kind of pushing out more content as far as what our space is and what we do.
Mhm,
And of
mhm.
course, if anybody wants to talk to me for about, 15 minutes asking me questions about starting a food business. We also have a course on how to start a food business in Ghana that people can sign up for.
Okay.
It's a virtual course. You have a bunch of videos and, homework and stuff to do. And you get a book on how to do it. There's so many ways that they can reach out to us. But if somebody wants to talk to me for 15 minutes, that's perfectly fine too. You can reach me on Instagram and go from there. So that's the thing. Our tagline is feeding your innovation. And so that is what we're known for, is feeding everyone's innovation from wherever you are in the world. But
Awesome.
definitely if you're local.
Awesome. Awesome. So one last time, let's get your website and then also your social media handles that they can follow you.
Sure. So on Instagram and X, it's Crescendo. So CRESCENDO _ foods with an S. We're also on LinkedIn as well as Facebook as Crescendo Foods Ghana. And then our website is https, the two little periods, //
Mhm.
with crescendo, GH is one word, .com. So you can find us there. You can always slide into our DMs. And we're also on TikTok as well. So TikTok is also Crescendo Foods Ghana. And you can see all the cool things that we do. We have a few behind the scenes, a bunch of reels of some of the events that we've done. We did
Nice.
the Accra Food Festival back in September, and you get to see a little. I think a lot of times people always see the seriousness of
Mhm.
business, and we like to actually show the playful side to what we do as well. So we're actually going to be, and we're on YouTube as well. We're on YouTube as Crescendo Foods, so you can always follow us, find out what we're doing. We definitely have some content yesterday of us making Cinnabons, and you just see like two just Black women just having a good time in the kitchen, and really just being silly. And I think that's something that we don't get a chance to show of ourselves. So yeah, stay tuned.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dr. Wanida, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and sharing your journey with us. Really appreciate it. And we're excited to see how the Plate to Plate program goes. So we're excited. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Anytime. Take care.
You too.